Morning 3K. So this is lesson 6 of our equivalent fractions, but today we're going to be using multiplication to help us to work out our equivalent fractions. When looking at and talking about fractions, we need to make sure we're using the key vocabulary such as equivalent fractions, a whole, adding, ordering and multiplication. So, I wonder whether you can remember all of those things that we've been learning about over the last few days of fractions. You might want to choose something you remember from yesterday's lesson, or something you remember from Tuesday's lesson, or actually something you remember from the previous week lessons, because they were all about fractions too. So just like we always do in school, if you could please short date and write 3 little dots in your margin and see if you can write down 3 things that you can remember about fractions. There's a bit of a clue in the picture on the slide, but see if you can remember something else. We always begin our lessons with a stem sentence. So today's stem sentence is, when I am finding an equivalent fraction, I must follow the rule. Now, can you remember what the word equivalent means? Well, equivalent means the same as, or equal to. So let's have a look at our in-focus task. What are the equivalent fractions of our half? Help Charles see a pattern. You can use the fraction wall to help you. When you've written all the fractions that you can find that are equivalent to a half, can you see a pattern? Is there a link or a rule? Right, let's learn together. So, have a look at number 1. Number 1 is a whole that's been split equally into 2 equal pieces, and each piece is 1/2. Remember, the 1 is the numerator and the number 2 is the denominator. When the shaded parts becomes 2 equal parts. But look at the same shape again, which has been split into 4 equal parts. So each part is now a fourth, or as we know it, 1/4. But the half has been split into 2 equal bits. So our half equals, the little equal signs means equivalent to or the same as 2/4. Let's have a look at number 2. When the shaded part becomes 4 equal parts, each part is 1/8. So a half is also the same as, equivalent to, equal to 4/8. Can you see a pattern in between 1/2, 2/4 and 4/8? Let's have a look at number 3. So, we've still got the half, but this time it's split equally into 6 equal parts. But the half now represents 3 equal parts. So our half is also equivalent to, equal to, or the same as 3/6. Let's have a look at number 4. 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. 1/2 is also equivalent to 3/6. And 1/2 is also equivalent to 4/8. What do you notice? What do you notice about the numerators and the denominators of equivalent fractions? Let's have a look at the picture below. So 1 is the numerator becomes 2 in the numerator of the equivalent fraction. What have we had to do to the numerators? If we look, we've had to multiply it by 2. Let's have a look at the denominators in 1/2 and 2/4. What have we had to do to the number 2 as the denominator to make the answer 4? That's correct, we've had to multiply it by 2. So let's look at the fractions 1/2 and 3/6. What have we had to do to the numerator, remember that's the top number, to get from 1 to 3? That's correct, we've had to multiply it by 3. But now let's look at the denominator, that's the bottom number, the 2 and the 6th. What have we had to do to the number 2 to get the answer 6? Correct, we've had to multiply it by 3. Now let's have a look at 1/2 and 4/8. Look at the numerators 1 and 4 in those fractions. What have we had to do to the number 1 to get the answer 4? Correct, we've had to multiply it by 4. Now look at the denominator on those two fractions. That's the bottom number. What have we had to do to the number 2 to get the answer 8? Correct, yes, we've had to multiply it by 4. So whatever we do to the numerator, we must do exactly the same to the denominator to get the equivalent fraction. So we've had to multiply the numerator by 2. We have to multiply the denominator by 2. If we've had to multiply the numerator by 3, then we have to multiply the denominator by 3 also. If we've had to multiply the numerator by 4, we then also have to multiply the denominator by 4. So if we use that rule of multiplication, with whatever we multiply the numerator by, we have to multiply the denominator by, is question 5 correct? So 1/2, is that equivalent to 5/10? And if you think it's correct, why do you think it's correct? Okay, have a go at these. Remember the rule of multiplication. Whatever we do to the numerator, we must do to the denominator. And also, whatever we do to the denominator, we must do to the numerator. Use this to help you find the equivalent fractions to the questions that are in number 1 and number 2. So, I want you now to explain step by step how you are going to find equivalent fractions using multiplication. I've done some sequence bubbles, I know they're squares, but some sequence bubbles to help you think logically about your explanation. You can either draw it or write your explanation as long as they are step by step. Put a new step in a new box. Have a go at these worksheets. Remember, use that multiplication rule that we spoke about. Whatever you do to the numerator, you must do to the denominator, and whatever you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator. Use the pictures to help you if you can. We can go through these, or if you have any questions, in our 30-minute session later. I have a little bit of a challenge for you now. I'd like you to tick the diagrams which show fractions equivalent to 1/2. Now don't get fooled by these, look very carefully. I'll speak to you soon. Hope to see you in our 30-minute catch-up session later today. Bye!